Hey guys, welcome to another Lifestyle of Eden podcast. I'm your host, Nick Tognietti, and today I have a very special guest, friend, and mentor, Dr. Vik Rajan. Vik, thanks for joining me, bro.
Thank you for having me.
So Vik and I have actually had a good handful of podcasts. I think probably three or four-ish, give or take, something along those lines. And I think we did, you know what? It was last year. We did IgA nephropathy, which obviously has a close tie to your family with your mother. And then thyroid, we did, oh, that's what it was. It was T4 to T3 conversion, which was
Yeah.
a really popular one. And then there was one more, I think it was leaky gut and autoimmune or chronic kidney disease, something along those lines, something. But no, today's going to be a really hot topic because we're going to discuss neurodegenerative diseases, really dementia. And what's interesting, a lot of people actually don't know this. Every time I tell them this, they're surprised, is that Parkinson's and Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. Dementia is just an umbrella, essentially, and then there's things within that umbrella. So we're going to discuss that today, and to kind of preface why this is big for every person listening, this is not just for 87-year-olds, is dementia in the United States, 1 in 2 US adults over the age of 85 have dementia. It is called type 3 diabetes, insulin resistance of the brain. But the reason why this matters to like somebody like me who's 31 is for a couple reasons. Number one, I personally have had grandparents with dementia. I think if 1 in 2 US adults over 85, most people listening to this have a grandparent or a parent with some form of a dementia or neurodegenerative disease. But number two, the studies are showing nobody got dementia from from a lifestyle habit that they started at 81 years old. This is really a progressive situation that is beginning with people from the decisions they're making with cortisol and blood sugar issues starting in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And the reason I say that is 50%, 1 in 2 US adults over 85 have a neurodegenerative disease, but 49.6%, which is 1 in 2 people, have prediabetes or diabetes in the United States. So it's like the diabetes and prediabetes and cortisol issues are just leading us in to the statistic over 85. So that's why I think it really hits home. So would you agree, Vik, that this is like a very underestimated or even undervalued topic in need of discussion?
Yes, it is, especially given the prevalence of Alzheimer's in the country and our conventional medical system's lack of ability to cure Alzheimer's disease. People need to know about what potentially can.
So obviously, and I'll give, because Vic won't, in humility he won't, but let me boast on Dr. Vic for a second. Number one, Dr. Vic has been a very strong mentor for me. Actually, a lot of people know about him just because I always talk, not so much anymore in public, but like generally I've always said, hey, there's a guy that I really respected and studied under. His name's Dr. Vic and so forth. But just from a mentor overview perspective, but Vic is 4-time board certified, which is, for those who don't know, board certification is basically if you go to your doctor who's a urologist, that's a board certification. Their board certification is their quote unquote expertise. About 1% of doctors in the United States of America have 4-time board certification. So Vic is board certified in nephrology. He's a nephrologist, which is a kidney specialist, pediatrics, which is for kids, internal medicine, which is for adults, and integrative medicine. And not only that, as if that wasn't enough, he's literally an ER doctor. So 3 times a week, he is in the emergency room for 72 hours a week, seeing even the most critical emergency cases. So from just every perspective, the guy is just a big wealth of knowledge. He's a big ball of knowledge. Everything he says, I would heavily take it pretty seriously. And if not as concrete, darn near. And Vic, in your experience, man, when it comes to neurodegenerative diseases, so like I said, dementia, which under that falls Parkinson's, under that falls Alzheimer's, things of that nature, what do you notice is the reason for this? Like, this is an epidemic here that is almost completely non-existent in not only the blue zones, or else it's very minimal, is India. And why do you think, I'll share my reasons later, but from a professional medical perspective and experience, what do you think is the reason for this radical epidemic?
I think it's the same reason that we have chronic disease in general. Right? I've talked about this many times, including on my website, conciergeintegrativemedicine.com.
Yeah.
Most chronic diseases, whatever the kind, was not caused by a lack of prescription drugs in our diet or the need for a surgery in our lifestyle. Well, our
Right.
problems with our diet and our lifestyle and what I call the algorithm of six. And these were issues with nutrition, stress management, sleep, exercise, isolation, environmental toxicity. When
Yeah.
you and everyone has imbalances in that in their life. No one has it all down perfectly. But when those imbalances exceed the body's ability to naturally cope, then you end up getting a disease. Now, in the case of Alzheimer's, which is the most common type of dementia, it's now believed to be thought of as called diabetes type 3, basically,
Right.
which is actually a function of insulin resistance that can eventually present as Alzheimer's disease down the road.
Yeah.
And again, insulin resistance, this is really a function of excess weight, excess carbohydrate intake that
Inflammation, heavy inflammation.
yes, that excess carbohydrate intake leads to high sugars. The high sugars leads to inflammation. That inflammation then leads to various diseases, autoimmune and otherwise, Alzheimer's being included in that. And,
You know what's interesting about what you said, Vic, just for the audience too. So notice, audience, that what Vic just said is algorithm of six. If you listen to what he said, he literally just explained my 7 pillars, right? So me and Vic always talk about that. Hey, what is this issue? Oh, it's algorithm of six, pillars of seven. And Vic, you know what's interesting? I was for my university, I was just building out the class this week on insulin resistance and diabetes, and also on LADA, latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. But what I find fascinating is out of the 38% of US adults that are pre-diabetic, 80% of those don't know. They've never been diagnosed. They don't know, they have no idea. And what I actually tell every person that comes into my practice, the statistic in my practice is that 70% of the adults that come into my practice are pre-diabetic and they do not know. And you want to know what's interesting about the 70%? About 70% of that 70%, it is not coming from actually bad diet. Most of them eat pretty darn clean. Like, for example, I was becoming pre-diabetic a couple years ago. And the reason being, the top two reasons that I'm seeing is number one, a hypothyroid. So their blood sugar regulation is totally just downregulated. But the other thing is this is about 90% of them is a cortisol issue. They're constantly running on glucose. They're inflamed with cortisol. They're not sleeping, which is leading to inflammation and stress and oxidative damage. It's raising their blood sugar. So it's which a lot of those are coming from violating my second pillar, which is like community isolation, which is like your algorithm of six. So that's what's interesting about this pre-diabetes, diabetes, and then leading into dementia epidemic is 10, 15 years ago, I would have told you, yeah, dude, they need to stop eating McDonald's. But now, most of the people I come across, like I said, including myself in the past, it's not even becoming from the poor diet they're eating. It's because of the stress that they're having. And then that stress is messing with the deiodinase enzyme that's hindering T4 to T3 conversion, which is down regulating blood glucose metabolism and all these things. So it's becoming a massive stress and cortisol epidemic that's leading into all of these things, I feel like.
Yeah, that can also play a significant role in autoimmune conditions in general. In fact, I would say
Right.
for the ones that I see with autoimmune, half of it may be a dietary issue that you can modify with an elimination
Right.
diet and improve. The other half, they need more than that. They need to fix the stress in their life. In fact, if they don't fix that, they will never improve. And
Right.
that could be ranging from having to change a job because it's killing them, or family dynamics and fixing that, being getting out of a stressful situation that your
Relationship.
body,
Yeah.
yep, that your body cannot handle. And I've seen many cases where that was the only way their symptoms went away. It was either exiting the situation or finding ways to fix it, something of the sort. I remember once at an allergy conference I was at, and there was a story. One of the doctors said he had this patient that had intractable eczema. He tried everything. He tried all the medications, the steroids, even, and he still was having eczema. And she eventually got lost to follow up and came back a couple of years later. And eczema was cleared. She was just visiting the doctor, and he saw it was like, eczema is clear. Wow, you look great. Yeah, that's it's like, you on any medications? No. And then he was like, well, what did you do? Just, I got a divorce and moved to Colorado, Rocky Mountain High.
There you go. See,
I mean,
and you've actually shared that with me before. You too. What's interesting with the dementia, Alzheimer's, and so forth is there's actually multiple studies that have been coming out even as recent as 2022 and so forth. They are showing the radical prevalence in male and female of the inhibition of FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, is actually reversing and or preventing dementia. And the reason why, what's fascinating about this is in male and female, we have to think about on a hormonal level what FSH does. In women, FSH triggers the granulosa cells, which is where the aromatase enzyme is to aromatize androgens into estrogen. In men, it's the the C cells with the Leydig cells and the Sertoli cells.
Sertoli.
Sertoli, I'm sorry, thank you. Sertoli cells. And that's where in the masculine counterpart where we have the aromatase enzyme and so forth, and that's what FSH triggers. And so what they're finding is, let's take women in menopause. We know that FSH and LH skyrocket, and the reason being is because it's saying, hey, we don't have the androgens and estrogen, so it skyrockets up. What we notice is immunologists, and we have a ton of PubMed literatures on this, when estrogen drops in women, autoimmunes and inflammation arise because estrogen receptors are all over the immune system, and it's very calming to the immune system. And so if you look at what that is, estrogen drops, the immune system goes up, but when estrogen drops, what goes up as well? FSH. So when you somehow lower FSH by giving estrogen, or you bind to the estrogen receptors with like phytoestrogens, Tempet, all of those different types of things, the immune system calms down. And if the immune system calms down, systemic inflammation calms down. If that calms down, insulin resistance calms down. And if that calms down, that's why it's leading to either a reversal of dementia issues or a prevention thereof, which the reason I think that's fascinating is because think about the foods that are absolutely foundational in the blue zones. Phytoestrogens. They're eating soy, they're eating tempeh, they're eating tofu, they're eating raw cacao, they're eating different types of berries that have these things. They're eating so many different, like wine is huge, right? Grapes, resveratrol. They're loaded up on these different types of things. So that's what's amazing to me about the studies that we're seeing with these different connections in regards to FSH specifically and autoimmune and dementia.
Yes, in those blue zones, they're taking whole natural foods, not processed foods, the
Right.
whole natural foods in modest amounts. They're not overeating either. It's and there's a better balance in terms of carb, protein, and fat balance than compared to the standard American diet.
Life work balance as well with stress,
Yep.
relationships, community. Like
Yep.
we're known for isolation here, right?
Yes. Yep. Especially since COVID, and then of course getting better sleep, which with a more relaxed lifestyle you can get, and also just staying active. These You have folks that are into their 80s, 90s that are still moving around, doing something, having some purpose, and oftentimes in our culture we're
Yeah.
sitting all day at a desk and not getting up most of the day. Sitting all day can reverse 30 minutes of exercise.
Yeah. Right.
And so, in fact, it's probably more effective to just get up every hour, even if it's for a couple of minutes, just to walk around and then
Right.
sit back down, than it would be to sit all day and then do
Yeah.
30 minutes of exercise at the end of the day. And
Well,
so,
and so real quick, because I want you to tell a story in a second. Before I do, for the audience, what we're leading to or alluding to, should I say, is that this dementia and all these things are your lifestyle habits that you're starting right now in your 20s and 30s going forward, and your insulin resistance, your prediabetes, and your cortisol issues are literally rivers that are pouring in to this massive lake, and that lake is called dementia. And if you keep riding those rivers up until your mid late 70s and early 80s, you're going to find yourself in the 50%, the one of two adults that end up getting there. And so this is why it's so big to really change the full lifestyle according to the 7 pillars or algorithm of 6. And one of the things that I'm doing, Vic, personally, recently I started seeing a therapist. And the reason being was because I built all the boundaries around my business that I can. My business, from a boundaried perspective, in that context, work-life balance, is actually, I don't think it could get any better. It's genuinely the best. It's unbelievable. But my issue is that I have a lot of trauma from like my past and the things that I grew up in that was causing me stress, making me lose sleep, staying up all night because I'm full of anxiety and this, that, and the other. And so working on that now and really lowering my need for, I just don't really care about making X amount of money anymore. For me, I'm like, hey, at a young age, I've made tons of money in a month, even over $50,000 in a month, to I've made $0 in a month. And I'm going to be honest with you, just because I made over 50 grand in a month, people think, oh, yeah, what are you stressed about? And it's like, dude, work was driving me into the ground. And I was like, honestly, I had no time for anything. I couldn't even work out. I gained 25 pounds of body fat. So I've just gotten to this point where I've prioritized what's more important to me, which is like being able to hang out with friends, laugh, spend time with my girlfriend, do all these different types of things. And I feel like we're on this hamster wheel of hustle, hustle. You need the bigger house. Now you're stressed out because you got to pay for the bigger house. Now your wife is stressed out because the wife has got to clean up the bigger house. And then because you have the bigger house and you have the nicer stuff, you got to work hard to pay those. But like, it's this vicious cycle. And I'll tell one story before I want to hear the story about the guy that reversed his dementia on his own that you'll tell is in the blue zones. There was a guy that was from Greece. He moved to the United States. He wanted to start the American dream when he was in his 20s, built this successful company. And by the age of 65, he was facing terminal lung cancer with 6 months to live. And he was diagnosed by 3 different doctors. So it was guaranteed. It was very validated. And so what he said was, I have 6 months to live. He goes, basically, he and his wife decided, I just really need to choose where I want to die. So he said, if I had to choose between Greece and the United States, he goes, that's a no-brainer. He goes, let's just go to Greece. Let me spend my last 6 months there, and I'll just die there. So they go back there. He doesn't change his diet in any way, shape, or form. He plants a vineyard, and he says, I'm not going to be able to harvest these grapes for the wine, but my wife will. And when she does, she'll think of me. 6 months go by. He didn't die. A year goes by. 3 years go by. 37 years go by. He's 102 years old. And they go, what happened? He goes, I just changed my environment. He goes, I still eat the same. I still enjoy good foods. But he goes, I'm not stressed out. I'm not drilling myself into the ground. I have good community. I have good wine. All of these different types of things. He reverses that disease. And we see this stuff all the time. When you really just take away all the oxidative damage from stress and all these things, what really happens. So I want to hear, or the audience to hear, how this man that you know of completely by himself with no medical intervention reversed his dementia.
Yes. So years ago, I met a gentleman who his assistant found me online, and to basically, he wanted to know if there's anything else he could do for for the prevention of dementia. Now, I ended up reading about this guy and about his story, and in fact, he'd even written about his own personal experience dealing with dementia, which was diagnosed. I think that was probably mid to late 2000s, I think, around that time when he was first diagnosed. So where do you get it diagnosed? It's like Baylor College of Medicine. They had a neurodegenerative center, and they said he had Alzheimer's at the time. And of course, there was no cure for it back then, still no cure for it now. They said, oh, here's some pills, may slow it down, but eventually it progresses, you end up in a nursing home, and that's
Right.
what it is. And it's like, I reject that. But I reject the pills. I reject the prognosis long term of this. And he decided to do what only 1 out of 10,000 people I've met over the years of decades of practicing clinical medicine have been able to do, which was fix their own chronic disease by themselves without the help of any doctors or healthcare practitioners. And he did this essentially by doing the algorithm of six himself. Before that, he's admitted, I didn't take care of my health and drank, smoked, didn't sleep very well. He was a business guy, so he was focused on that all the time. Just his life was out of balance. He ate junk. And so he started really looking into, okay, how do I learn to beat Alzheimer's and reverse this? Now, keep in mind, this was at a relatively early phase. The symptoms were mild, and that's an important thing to note, because for some of these potentially terminal diseases, it's important that you make the changes when it's in the mild to moderate phase, not at the severe end stage. For any disease, it's hard to do anything about that because too much damage to the body at that point. But in the mild to moderate phase, oh, there's still room. It just takes a lot of work, but it can be done. And so this guy basically made health his priority. It made health his new business, his personal health, and just changed everything systematically, one by one. I think he had a functional nutrition coach at the time, and he just all the things that he did. When I was reading about it, and he was telling me about it at the time, and describing to me what was like the algorithm of six. This is before I even had written about it for myself. Like, I have an algorithm of six health manual. At the time, this was like almost 10 years ago. I didn't have it in a manual form, but his story that he'd written out, and I was reading through it, just read, this is almost like a manual. This is what he did. And it was like, this is what anyone could do. And it was very extensive. By the time I saw him, I'm like, you have Alzheimer's? He's like, I just don't see it. And he said, no, I've been doing this for years now. And the reason he called me was to see, is there anything else more that he could do? And it was one of the few times I ever had to say to a patient, I don't think there's anything else I can do for you. You've already done it. And at this point, he was in his, I think, early to mid 80s, early 80s at the time. And I said, look, keep doing what you're doing. And whatever you pass away from someday, as we get to old age, late 80s, 90s, hundreds even, everyone passes away from something. I said, whatever it is, it's not going to be Alzheimer's. Because
What's interesting as like a practical example for this too is that so like I have certain people in my family that have had a form of dementia, Alzheimer's, whatever it is, and the Parkinson's clients and so forth that I've also worked with, every single one of them have had prediabetes, kidney disease, which is generally from like a cortisol issue causing blood pressure, and or prediabetes of some sort causing that with the kidneys, major gut infections causing systemic inflammation. Like they've had the whole recipe of blood sugar, some sort issue going on, and inflammation just ensuing. And then now they are where they are. And so I feel like it's so easy to be like, hey, you got to fix your stress and you got to fix your boundaries and blah, 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 and your work-life balance. But no joke, something that I just came to terms with recently, like a lot of people know I'm also a pastor and a doctor. So I run a ministry and my business, and there's just a lot of things that I run. Well, one of the things I've always told people is that if the devil cannot get you to do obviously bad things, he'll get you tied up in a bunch of good things. Meaning, bad things are like, hey, you spend your money on meth and pornography and you're cheating on your wife. And like, those are just obviously bad things that some people just genuinely can't get out of. They're stuck, they're addicted, whatever. But somebody like me, which I feel like is most people, is I'm not addicted to bad things. I got out of that life. So what are you going to do? You're going to distract me and make me busy with a bunch of good things. So I have pastors and doctors that will call me. Like I just had pastors from California call me last week at 11 o'clock at night. And thank God my phone was on airplane mode. And they were like, hey, Nick, can you reach out to us? We need your help with blah, blah, blah. And I just told them, I said, hey, listen, I love you guys, but with all due respect, I go, if you're not in my ministry online every Shabbat when I'm teaching and so forth, I go, you're not one of my sheep. And that's not a bad thing. It just means that I have to focus on what I have to focus on, because otherwise I'll be stretched way too thin and extended this. That I just had other client or other people who they're family friends of my family, of my older brother, and they just moved to Costa Rica because the wife is like crazy sick. No US doctors can figure it out, all this stuff. So she sent me like a dozen labs to look at and said, "Can you look at these and then we can get on a call?" And I told her, I just said, "Hey, listen, I love you. I've known you for years. But unless you're doing this with my intake forms to sign on a consultation and sign into my practice," I go, "I can't, I don't have time to look at these." I go, "If you want to pay me 375 for a consultation for review," I go, "I can do that, but I can't just do all of this I just don't have the time." And I go, "I can't stretch myself thin." Those are things that somebody might say, "Nick, those are good things, ministering to another pastor or helping this one." It's good until it's not. And you have to have boundaries with what is in your circle, what is not. It's the same thing even in my ministry. I have a lot of things in my ministry right now that have been sitting in my email for 3 months because I refuse to get to them. Why do I refuse to get to them? Because they're a bunch of administrative tasks that, quite frankly, are not my role. Like, I am the apostle and leader and teacher of the ministry. All of the small tasks and that, it's not that I'm above it or, oh, I'm better than that or I'm too good for that. It's that it's not my role. And it's a bunch of small things of micromanaging that will drive me crazy. And I've just set my boundaries to know what the Lord has me to focus on. And most people, I don't think, can do that. They want to help everybody. They want to try to be Superman. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not a good thing. Like, that's not a good trait. It's going to lead you in a bad direction. But the other thing with that too is, I actually was just talking to my girlfriend about this yesterday, where I told her, I said, Mondays and Wednesdays really stress me out. I've got like almost 100 clients on my roster, and I've got a mentor program, and I got a university coming out, and I've got ministry, and I've got all this stuff. And Mondays and Wednesdays are my update days for my clients. And I go, they stress me out so much those days because I have so much work. And then Tuesdays come around and I'm stressed out because I know the next day is update day. And then Thursday and Friday, I'm relieved on one hand, but I'm stressed out because I'm like grieving the fact that it's only 2 or 3 days before I have to go back into the next week and do the same thing. And it's constantly chronically risen my cortisol and stuff. So what I decided was, I said, do I make a lot of money and stuff? I'm very thankful that, yeah, I do. And that's a relative term, right? There's many other people, including yourself or whoever, that make way more money than I do. That's a relative term. But like in my own standards and my own life and stuff, no, I feel like I make some pretty good money. But if I'm getting unhealthy and I'm not able to work out and honor my 7 pillars of stress management and this, that, and the other, it's not worth it. And so what I literally decided, I told my girlfriend, I said, hey, you know what? After this month is over for July, because of my July special that I did for the summer, I go, I'm done taking clients for a while. I said, I'm not going to start pushing out social media, bringing on clients until Black Friday in about 4 months. And I go, I'm good. Like, even if that means I make a little less money every month, I go, my stress already is crazy much lower just by doing that, and I feel way better. I love my business now. I was working myself into the ground, and I was really running from past trauma. I used to be totally broke, and I've always been terrified of that because when I was married before, I couldn't support us financially. My wife was the breadwinner. People in my family looked down on me. Her family definitely looked down on me. And it was always a major like trauma point for me. And I've always been afraid of that. Hey, I don't want to get married again and not be able to do this. So I'm always driving myself into the ground, running myself away from being broke. Even if I make $10,000 in a day, I'm like, no, I've got to go make more. I've got to go make more. And so now I've gotten to this point where I'm super comfortable with where I'm at. And I'm just like, no, I'm okay with making less. If it means I get to spend more time with my girlfriend and more time with my dog and with some friends and less stress, that is a practical example of things that this country is not willing to do. Like,
Yeah.
they're just constantly drilling themselves into the ground, stressed out, and they just can't let go of saying, why do I need all this money? Why do I need this big house? I don't need all of it. I don't even need half of the money I make. And so I'm like, for what? It's nice, but if this is the fruit of it, is my cortisol and me not being able to work out or do my 7 pillars, or I've gained 25 pounds because my cortisol has caused adipose tissue to increase or whatever, I go, or your sex drive. Most of these people have no sex drive because it's robbing their sex lives. I go, It's not worth it. It's stupid. Like, you're not prioritizing things. And so I think people need to not just listen to this podcast. I think they need to get really freaking granular, and they need to realize, dude, we have self-inflicted stress. Like, I have some clients, Vic, that I'm not going to name who they are. They're great clients. They listen to me. They're great clients. They're husband and wife. I genuinely love this couple. Love them to death. I'd do anything for them. But they're a prime example of self-inflicted stress. The wife has had autoimmune. She used to have Cushing's. She got one adrenal removed. She has breast implants that are causing rapid problems in her life. She needs to get her breast implants removed. My girlfriend had breast implants. That's a very common thing where breast implants are causing problems on the autoimmune, right? And
Yeah.
I've told her, you need to get these removed. Her husband has even said, I don't want you to get them removed because I like them. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, this is like that. I don't even have anything to say to that. It's ridiculous. And then the husband buys this massive house and the wife cleans it up every day. I kid you not, Vic. Do you know what she told me? I said, why are you so stressed every day? She goes, Nick, do you want to know genuinely why I'm stressed? And I go, what is it? She goes, I'm tired of cleaning this freaking house every day. I clean it every single day after my husband and my kids. It's a massive house. I have to do it nonstop. It genuinely stresses me out and infuriates me. And she goes, we don't even need this big house. She goes, we just moved into it. Like, I don't even know why we need it. And I'm like, exactly. And now the husband is stressed out because of certain supplements he has to buy. Because he's like, Nick, we got to spend this on this and this on this. And I'm like, you're spending money on things that you don't even need. And I'm telling you to buy things that you do need temporarily right now. So it's downsize the home, get the breast implants out, stop needing to pay for these massive things. For what? Like, all you need is the basics. You need a kitchen to make your food. If you want a backyard or whatever, cool. This, that, and the other. Spend time with your family. But we have a lot of self-inflicted stress. Every one of us. I even have it. I even know family members that have it. I've watched their lives and I'm like, that's self-inflicted. That's self-inflicted. That's prideful. That's self-inflicted. I'm guilty of it. And that's why I've just said I've had to get really granular and go, what is the root of my problems? And like, how do I fix that right now? And what I told my girlfriend this week, I said, look, if I really want to change this nation, which I do believe that I will, with God's help, if I want to change this nation, how can I change this nation unless I'm genuinely embodying, as an example, my 7 pillars?
Yeah.
Like, we have to do this. Like, even you, I'm sure you probably come across this too, to some degree, because you work like 80 hours a week. And it's like, on one hand, hey, yeah, no, it's good. But on the other hand, I'm sure there are those thoughts where you go, oh my gosh, I'm working myself into the ground for what? I want to hang out with my kids. I want to do this. I think it's something that we all have to confront in our lives and really get granular on.
Yes, work-life balance is an important thing. In fact, even as I'm working 70 plus hours a week, I'm also developing strategies for myself to say, over the ensuing years, not eventually have to work that much to that degree. And but that requires certain. There's two ways to look at it. One, yes, downsize. Now, some people, they may not be in a financial position where they can for whatever reason, right? And then the other is learn how to make money in your sleep. Because if you don't know how to make money in your sleep, you're going to work till you die. And that's actually something that a very famous investor by the name of Warren Buffett said many years ago. And so, for me personally, for example, I ended up developing an investing system based off of something that Warren Buffett famously said. He said, for the average investor that does put it in an index fund like the S&P and leave it alone, because it'll do better than 90% of the professionals and 98% of the amateurs. And see, this is one thing where, people who are making money, if they're not saving it to invest, then you're already behind the curve. You should be saving to invest. Even if you don't make a ton of money, that has to be a priority, because just saving a little bit and investing it in some sort of index style system like an S&P can, over time, that money, with the power of compound interest, it's a phenomenal thing, compound interest, because even if you're making, say, 10, 15, in my case, what I did was I created a filter for the S&P, because I found that 8 years ago when I was studying it, 80% of the growth from the S&P comes from 20% of the stocks. And I said, what if I just find these growth stocks and invest in those? Then I should do better. I couldn't find a screener for it, so I had to make one. And people were like, oh, you use AI? I'm like, yeah, I use AI, autistic intelligence. Yeah, that's my AI.
Yeah.
And so I would use that, and then more formulas, metrics, calculations, came up with a list of 15 to 20 stocks, bought it, hold it for a year, update it every year because what grows one year may not grow the next, and get a new list of 15 to 20 stocks. Keep on doing this, and year after year, 5 years into it, just looking at it as a theoretical model to see if it would even work, it was doing double the S&P. It was like, at that time, it was like 20% versus the S&P was 10%. And then so at the end of December 2022, I said, you know what? I'm going to go all in. All my retirement accounts, my wife's are going to go all in into this strategy because this is the best strategy that I've seen. This is doing better than any of the market strategies could offer. So I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And a couple of years in, it's been more than double. And 23, it was up like 48%. 24 is up 33%. This year, it's up like 14, 15%. And so, it's in fact, year on year, the average annual growth rate was about 25% versus the S&P during that same 8 years was 14%. And, what for me, that ended up proving to be actually a major stress relief because now I have the confidence that, look, I don't have to do this forever. This guy, yeah, I have to do it for a period of time, and you got to optimize my health and nutrition and everything. But then if I invest in this system and just keep on doing it, by the time my retirement accounts open up at 59 and a half, I'm done. I'll have 8 figures. I won't ever have to work a day in my life unless I just want to for fun. And
Right.
which is also good. You don't want to completely retire and do nothing. That
I agree.
I
I
decline.
100% agree. You've got to have purpose. It's
Yes.
what the Japanese people in Okinawa and the Blue Zone they call ikigai. You've got to have that purpose and lack thereof. It's why I always say I'm never going to genuinely quote unquote retire. I might change how I go about my passions and what I do and how much I do into that or whatever, but I'm never going to like retire from ministry or like retire from health. There's still going to be some form of consulting or studying and coming out with books or something. There's something because you've got to have purpose, right?
Yes.
But that's the thing is that the point is that this whole beast of dementia, and might I just say diabetes in general, because it's just all blood sugar issues, whether the root of that blood sugar is cortisol, gut issues, inflammation, whatever it is, the root, it's a blood sugar issue that's causing insulin resistance, and then therefore we're leading into dementia, neurodegenerative disease. These things, the reality is the answer is that the prevention of it's free. And the prevention of it is the algorithm of 6, pillars of 7. I always tell people my 7 pillars are free of charge. Like they're totally free. We pay for all these other things. You want to pay for all these peptides. You want to pay for all, and I'm not against them. I'm just saying you want to pay for all these peptides. You want to pay for all this, that, and the other. And I'm like, my pillars are free. Your algorithm is free of charge.
Yeah, I put it on my website, the whole thing, including some of the materials that I use for coaching for because there's a lot of folks out there that can't even afford coaching because their finances are very limited and they're struggling. I put some of this out there for them in case they can't even afford it. If they can, it'll help because then they'll be able to understand this stuff faster. But even if they can't, it is out there.
And let me just also tell people this too, is that like most of these people have gut issues and cortisol issues, which is why they have brain fog. They've got crazy brain fog. Let me just tell you, dementia, Alzheimer's, it's just an abundance of brain fog. What is Alzheimer's? You're forgetting everything, right? What is the cortisol issues and the brain fog? You're forgetting everything. It's just an abundance of that. So right now, if you're in your 80s, or you know somebody in their 80s that has this is the stuff they need to be doing. And if you're somebody in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, and you're noticing that you fall into the categories of inflammation, you fall into the categories of cortisol, you fall into the categories of any form of a blood sugar issue, you need to understand that where you are at is going right down into the lake or the body of water of dementia and neurodegenerative diseases. And you need to make these changes now, and you need to go all in on them. Like, this is not something to delay and say, oh yeah, over time I'll start to apply that. You need to apply it now. I think that this is going to be a very relatable podcast because, like I said, given that it's 1 in 2 U.S. adults over 85, I think every person that will ever listen to this podcast knows somebody who has it. You either know somebody or you have a family member. It's 1 in 2. It's 50%. And if we don't fix what we're doing, we're going to become those 1 in 2. Like the fact that statistic states that by definition, either me or you are going to have dementia. God forbid. But that statistic says that. Now I'm going to break that statistic with God's help. But the point is that this relates more and hits home more than I think most people realize. And if we could only just do the things that are extremely preventing of this disease that the medical world will not help you do, they don't want to help you prevent it necessarily. So this has been good. And I like that they get to hear from you on this as well. But like I said, I also think that there's radical understanding when it comes to the FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, how we prevent this and what follicle stimulating hormone is telling us. What that means is that I think that there are major dietary concepts when it comes to estrogens, phytoestrogens, that we need to start implementing into our regimens. And by doing these different things and by removing endocrine disrupting chemicals and PCBs from all of these other toxins in farm fresh fish and everything else that actually bind to our estrogen receptors more than estradiol does. I think that these are critical components. So I think that every case is individualized. I think there's probably a season where everybody needs a practitioner for a year, 2 years, 3 years to be able to learn the ropes on how to do these different types of things. But just knowing that the biggest point I want people to take from this podcast is it's not a mystery. We have the keys, we have the answers, we have the reasons why. Now let's do something about it.
Yeah, I agree. Whether it's algorithm of 6 or pillars of 7, that simplified for me when I was studying integrative medicine a dozen years ago. And I was just seeing these common themes, and
Right.
it's almost like a formula for this. And that's how I ended up coming up with the algorithm of 6. So what are the things that seem to be repeating? It's all issues with nutrition and stress management and the sleep. And then it eventually came up with this form algorithm of 6. And it's like, that's what it is. Every chronic disease is because of imbalances in that. And if you fix those things, then the chronic diseases go away. It doesn't matter what the mechanism is, whether you're talking about insulin resistance, the FSH, protein folding, whatever it is, the vast majority of these chronic diseases, which the conventional medical system, for the most part, is not able to cure most chronic diseases. Acute diseases, yes, you're suffering from a heart attack, yes, go to an emergency room, get a cardiac cath. You've got
Right.
some sort of bacterial pneumonia or tuberculosis or something, yes, go take antibiotics, anti-tubercular meds, and that'll cure that for the time. But in terms of a lot of chronic diseases, no, it's not. It wasn't caused by the lack of prescription drugs in our diet or the need for surgery in our lifestyle. It was caused by
Right.
problems with our diet and lifestyle. And that formula, whether algorithm is 6 or pillars or 7, is a fundamental understanding. You have to have that in your mindset to know how to not just prevent chronic disease, but fix existing chronic disease that you may have, because in the mild to moderate phase, it's actually still quite curable if you implement those changes. It takes a lot of work, and it may help to have a coach too. But if you do that, it'll make more difference than all the prescription drugs and procedures and all the conventionalologists and doctors that you can have, which in the end, like I said, doesn't cure most chronic diseases. You can cure
Right.
yourself.
Amen. Amen. This has been really good, Dr. Vic. I appreciate you coming on here and sharing your knowledge on everything with all of it. I think it's going to be a blessing to the audience as well. And so if the audience has any questions on how to reach out, Dr. Vic's information will be in the summary in the bio below. So please check him out, check out his website, email him for any questions. And if you have any questions for me, obviously y'all can always email in, follow me on social media. But let's get this beast under control and hinder it in its tracks due to changing our lifestyle with the algorithm of 6 and pillars of 7. So stay tuned until the next episode. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.